Welcome everybody to Horses and Humans Research Foundation Webinar Wednesday. I'm Dr. Pebbles Turbyville. I'm the Executive Director, and we're excited this evening to be hearing from not one, but two great speakers about their experience with equine facilitated, I want to say, is it psychotherapy? Is that right, Noreen?
Yeah,
Close enough?
that works. Yes.
Yeah. You have a great model that you're going to tell us about. So I'm going to turn it over to the two of you to go ahead and introduce yourselves, and let's get started.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think, do I share screen? Let's see.
Sure. At the bottom there.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, and then that should be, can you see that? Yes.
We can.
Got that. Okay. I will start, and then Angela, you introduce yourself, and then we can start with the presentation. So I had to write down who I was because I was surprised. I'm like, oh, who am I? Yes. My name's Noreen Esposito. I am a retired associate professor from UNC in Chapel Hill and a fellow in the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners. I'm a psych nurse practitioner. I've been doing equine-assisted psychotherapy and equine-assisted learning for the last 10 or 11 years in North Carolina. And I have a private practice as a psych nurse practitioner, and I have a horse. Yes. Okay. And an author. I'm an author. Angela.
Hi, I'm Angela Fournier. I am a professor in the Department of Psychology at Bemidji State University, which is up here in the Northwoods of Minnesota. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I'm certified with the EGALA to do equine-assisted psychotherapy and learning. Been doing that for since about 2014. And then I like to do research and study human-animal interaction, specifically kind of looking at lately human and horse interaction and how we can understand how psychotherapy or learning with horses works. So I was really excited. I knew Noreen, and she told me about this theory that she was working on, and was very excited to join her on this journey. And we're excited to share with you today.
Yes. All right. Thank you. All right. So I left in this, our goals for this presentation are to convey the idea that it would be nice to have a unifying theory in equine-assisted services, and to summarize what our theory is: EAST, equine-assisted story transformation, and maybe at the end come up with some research or clinical problems where EAST might be applicable, or hopefully we'll have hundreds of research questions. So all you need to remember about EAST, really, I think the focus is that it is a body-mind experience for the horse and a body-mind experience for the human. And I think a lot of what we do, particularly from a therapy perspective, is focus more on the human and on a lot of the cognitive things that happen, what happens in our mind and how we can change our mind. And so the idea that is not a new idea of integrating mind and body, but just remembering that there's a mind and body of a human and a mind and body of a horse that's engaged or in the same space in some way, and that this happens in an environment. There's a context. So, we started to wonder, what if we could explain how whatever happens in equine-assisted interventions? Because we listen to people talk about it's magic, it's amazing, it just happens. And because we're researchers, we were like, whenever you say there's magic, there's probably some explanation underneath. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure this out, and really became aware of how challenging it is, because equine-assisted interventions, and we came mostly from equine-assisted psychotherapy and learning. and originally the EGALA model, although we really have, this is not about the EGALA model, but it's broader than that. But these interventions have multiple interacting parts. They're complex, they're unpredictable. No two sessions are ever the same. The variables are pan-theoretical, and it's always context specific. It depends on the setting, the weather, the environment, where you're inside, you're outside, the model, the facilitation, the facilitators, the goals of the session. So there's so many different things changing. It makes it difficult to understand how things are going. I'm assuming you can see the whole slide because I can only see part of it. So in looking at theories and how one might do research and looking at all of the research that was out there, a lot of what is out there uses a model-driven paradigm. It's that change is attributed to the unique things in the therapy model. Like if I do equine facilitated psychotherapy, I use one approach and that creates one thing, and it's what I do that makes it work. And if I do path, I have a different approach. And if I do natural lifemanship, I have a different approach. And it's those unique approaches that cause change in the person. That is the idea of a model-driven paradigm. So we have all these separate groups of equine-assisted interventions that are out there. But we always hear about it's the horse, it's the horse, it's the horse. So if you put these things together, the idea of a common factor paradigm is the idea that change happens not because of the unique individual models, but because of the things that those models share together and cross over each other. So it is really a shared thing. And the model becomes a vehicle for how you deliver those things in a particular way. And that's sort of the basis of this. We are not talking about a model. We are not talking about how to do this intervention. This is absolutely just an umbrella theory about a systems kind of theory about how things change, how things occur during this process, regardless of what particular approach you're using. So we like this idea because it could be used for many different theories and many different models. And if we had some common theory, we could build a body of research that was stronger than all these unique little satellites that we have at this particular time. So EAST was developed over a period of time using an iterative process of combining practice. For some reason, I'm not sure how to get rid of this. Whoop. All right, let me go back.
What we're seeing is very clear, Noreen, just so you know.
Yes.
Okay, let me go back. I just can't read my words, but I should remember them.
I can read them to you.
Okay. Developed over time using an iterative process combining something and science.
Practice and science.
Practice. Oh, yes. Informal observation that we did from practice, sitting in the field going, what is going on? Why is this working? Why is it not working? Literature review, talking to a lot of people who practiced and did work in this field. And then we came up with a theory, and then we used autoethnography and analyzed our own experiences in great minute detail to see if there was any accuracy in what we came up with. And so it was a very interesting process, and we ended up writing a book because there's a lot of pieces and moving parts. And EAST, the acronym for the theory, it is not a static theory. It's not like it's going to stay forever. It's evolving as neuroscience is evolving, as we're learning more about how physiology and the brain work, and we're adapting and keeping it moving and current with what there is out there. So the organization of this theory is that we started out with domains of human experience. Since we can't quite know what the horse's experience is, this part is on the human domains in interaction with the horse and the environment, and that the whatever FAC facility, I'm not sure what it's.
Facilitators.
Facilitators. Okay. And the idea is not necessarily that the human and the horse are touching each other or close together. It is really just that they are both in the same environment. They might not have any contact at all. So the human being has a physiological domain. What is happening neurologically in their body, inside their sense of safety? It may be below the level of awareness. It's just happening that our body is always doing this. And then there's a sensory domain, the things that we take in through our senses, what we smell, what we see, what we hear, and what we touch. And so that is a second part of the experience. And then there's this conceptual symbolic domain, which is really about all of the past memory and experience that we've had that we bring to any particular situation and how we've converted and translated it to give meaning to our lives. And then during the experience, how we shift all of those domains to come up with the words and the images and the story. That's the cognitive domain, what's happening in our mind. So the theories that we use include polyvagal. I'm sure you've, as I look, the more I look, the more it's showing up in all these different equine models, the idea of polyvagal. So it's definitely out there. The sensory domain, we talk about interoception and perception. In the symbolic domain, we used or started using conceptual metaphor theory, and then we've grown from there. And in the cognitive domain, we include narrative theory, and then we invented horse theory. It's just what we call how we understand the horse. And then at the end, we added change theories, transformational learning and experiential learning theory. It's really what happens after the actual experience. So I had a theory or an idea put together of how these things were working, but I was always troubled by the idea that something was happening inside the person. And because I'm a nurse and I spent a lot of time with nurse-patient interaction and the thing that happens between two living beings, I just felt like somehow we needed to capture that thing that was happening between the human and the horse. And I got dragged to this training on polyvagal theory. I had no clue what it was. I didn't know what it was. A friend of mine, another therapist, said, "Oh, you have to come and learn it." So I sat in on this training and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the horses. This is all about the horses. And it was Deb Dana was doing it, and I asked her about it, and she said, "Oh yeah, it works with horses. I'm sure it works with horses." So that was how I ended up putting that into this theory. And so polyvagal theory is in itself fairly complicated and involved, but basically what it is a science of feeling safe. It is, oh, too bad I can't read this, sophisticated understanding of the biology of danger and safety, the subtle interplay between our visceral experiences in our body and the voices and behaviors of people and horses around us, the living things, particularly social mammals around us. So it focuses on what is happening in the body and the mind, I think. What does that say? Nervous system.
Nervous system, yeah.
Says, yes. And shows how our sense of safety, danger, or threat to life impacts our thoughts and our behavior. What is happening in our body shifts what we think about in our mind. So polyvagal theory really fits in the physiological domain of the body. It's about survival and safety and social engagement. And there are three tenets to polyvagal theory. The idea that there's a hierarchy of our defense survival system. this invented word called neuroception and the idea of co-regulation. So this Stephen Porges is the person that developed the polyvagal theory. And basically he's saying, you know, number one, above all else, we are designed to survive. That is the base, that is the automatic thing that happens in any situation. If there's a threat to our life, we start out with the most basic. This dorsal is the most basic defense system, which is where we would totally shut down, curl up in a ball, our brain stops working, blood gets shunted to our body. It's sort of a total no energy, no feeling, almost no awareness at its extreme. And it's what happens just before we die if we're being attacked. And it also is kind of the place that we go to when people are depressed or really down and have no energy. The next part of our defense system, it's from an evolutionary perspective, is called the sympathetic nervous system. These two on the ventral and the dorsal are part of parasympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system, which we all know, we see if we've seen horses, they do a lot of sympathetic. This is where our heart rate goes up, we have energy, our muscles are tight and ready to fight or run away. And it arouses us and we are alert and ready to protect ourselves. So it's a very active defense mechanism. The dorsal one is a real shutdown one. And so if dorsal and sympathetic are not activated and there is no feeling that there is a threat to safety, you don't actually have to have a threat. It's how we are feeling. If our body and mind thinks that we're safe and there are cues that things are safe, then we can move more into this ventral vagal state, which is the part of the vagus nerve that is up near the neck. It's cranial nerve number 10. And it's important because it hangs out in the same neighborhood as all of these other nerves that innervate our ability to communicate and connect with other human beings. So little babies automatically are able to do this when they smile, when they coo, and all humans use the same frequency or language. It's all connected to this vagus nerve, all designed for social engagement. Because if we're not defending from some kind of danger, then we're able to connect with others, and our survival also depends on our ability to connect to others. And not only is that for humans, but it is also for horses. Horse survival depends on their ability to be able to be in a herd, to communicate, and to be social. And all social mammals have this. The second tenet is this idea of neuroception, which is that it's happening below our level of awareness. It's neural, and it's like nerve endings, and it's sort of sensing what's happening in the environment, like little radar things, always paying attention. And if it picks up or has the idea that there's some kind of danger, then we start to feel uncomfortable and we become aware of it and pay attention to it and interpret it. And the third part is the idea of co-regulation, which is that two social beings, one can calm the other down. And we see that with a mother picking up a crying baby, and she holds the baby and she puts it over the vagus nerve, and she puts her hand on the back of the baby, which is also near the vagus nerve, and she breathes and has a particular vocal tone, and the baby gets calm. That's co-regulation. We all needed co-regulation when we were babies, and then we learned to self-regulate. So we learned to do this by ourselves. But as adults, we also need to still co-regulate. We co-regulate with other people all the time. And we co-regulate with horses. So often when people are in a space with horses, they'll say, I'm so much more relaxed. And that's very likely co-regulation. So these three states are sort of on a little ladder. Deb Dana is somebody who's translated polyvagal to a more therapy approach. And so she has this idea, this hierarchy of starting at this very basic shutdown, and then the sympathetic, and then ventral. And in each of these spaces, how we see the world changes. So this ventral vagus, horses have each of these states as well. They can connect, they can be in sympathetic and anxious, or they can be shut down. And this is a diagram or more detail of how and all the characteristics of polyvagal as part of the autonomic nervous system, which I have as a slide and I'm happy to share with you, but I'm not going to go over all the little details. Okay, this next theory idea is this conceptual symbolic domain. It's really our implicit memory and all of our past experiences. So we have all this background information, a huge library of life experiences that we carry around with us in our mind, but it's really integrated in our body. When we have a memory, it happens in our mind, but we experience it in our body as well. It's all there. Plus, we are continuously collecting non-conscious information. Things are coming into our experience and memory. And out of our awareness, our mind is always working on identifying patterns, trying to figure out what's going on, and predicting what is going to happen in the next moment. Our mind is always working on that. And a lot of it is happening under our radar. It's very fast, it's complex processing that happens without us trying to do anything. And an example of it is what happens when you have a problem and you go to sleep at night, and it's a complex problem you've tried to figure out during the day. And at night, in the middle of the night, you wake up and you're like, oh, there's the answer, because our under awareness is doing all this processing. And then we move that up to our more conscious, slower processing mind, where we need all these extra things like little sticky pads and notepads and pieces of paper and reminders to be able to function in the world. Because our prefrontal cortex that thinks that it's running everything actually is just kind of a command center that is being informed by an enormous amount of information in the body. And 80% of our information comes from down here, and only 20% comes from up here. So we have experiences and we store them. And then when we have an exposure to an event, like being with a horse, we experience a lot of it in our body and our mind, and we often don't have words for it. And if you talk to somebody who's in a session and you ask them, they just may not be able to answer, or they may be able to answer and make sense, but it may only be in one-word responses. It takes a little time. We have to translate an enormous amount of information into words, and language only represents a small amount of our experience. So now I'm going to pass the baton to Angela.
Thank you. And when you introduced yourself, Noreen, you forgot to mention illustrator. So
Oh.
I'm going to point out to folks that the drawings that you've been seeing have been Noreen's work, and she did all the illustrations in our book, and including this horse right here. So horse theory is kind of what we call our understanding of horses and the different parts about horses that make them a unique animal to partner with in interventions. And so we have here kind of these different layers. So if we think about, for example, you could have other animals present, or you could incorporate other animals into interventions, right? And having an animal provides stimuli for the senses. Horses are a particular animal that has a particular history of domestication, where they're domestic, but still a little bit wild. They're considered non-predatory, prepared to flee if needed or fight. They have a certain herd and social structure. They have a certain way of communicating. And so all of these factors combine to make them sort of the unique animal that they are, to have the unique experience that they have when they're with humans, when they're in a particular environment. And so their bodies are reacting the way that they do during an equine session based on all these different characteristics that they have. And then, of course, the way that they are responding to their environment becomes part of our environment as humans, and there's a sort of complicated back and forth dynamic experience.
Next slide, should I?
Yeah, unless you want to add anything else about that. And so we definitely consider the horse a sentient being. It's social, autonomous, sensitive, large and reactive, responsive and dynamic. Again, non-predatory. They have a polyvagal system, like Noreen said. They're a social mammal. They have memory, they have thoughts and experiences. So they bring these things with them to an equine session, just like we bring ourselves and our experiences to a session. They may be at liberty or not, depending on what type of model folks are using. And of course, that would influence their behavior during a session. So again, kind of just characteristics about horses that shape how they experience the world, including interactions with humans.
So these horse-human interactions are complex. You know, we have all these different variables, and both the horse and the human are prompts for each other for arousal and awareness, anxiety, calm, curiosity. And for the human, the horses can be a stimulus for the physiological domain, the sensory domain, the things that we're experiencing, the smells and touch, for our metaphorical and conceptual domain, what is below our level of awareness, things we don't remember that are based on our past experience, and then the words and stories that we use. So this brings us to sort of what all of those things were about, what was happening. And I really glossed over and didn't talk about narrative theory because we can't fit it in here, but we did want to talk about these theories of change, which Angela, you're going to talk about, right? Yep.
Sure, yep.
Okay. There.
So Kolb's experiential learning theory talks about these kind of 4 different phases or domains when you are learning through experience. And most of us would probably consider psychotherapy or learning incorporating horses as being experiential intervention. And so there's the experiencing. After the experiencing happens, then there can be reflecting on the experience. And this can influence your thinking, and it can change how you're thinking, and that change in your thinking can then lead to action and change in behavior, which then goes with you into kind of future experiencing. So again, we have the equine experience followed by reflection, which can help to lead to changing in the way that we think about ourselves and the world, a part of how change happens. And then the next is transformational learning theory by Mesereau. And this theory states that we can have what's called a disorienting dilemma, where what we think will happen, again, through experience, what we think might happen, we're kind of always trying to predict, understand what's happening and predict what's going to happen. And sometimes what we think is going to happen doesn't. Something different happens. And you can think about this certainly with horses. We might imagine the horse is going to come to me and it doesn't, or run away from me and it doesn't, or whatever that might be. And when that happens, then we have to examine our beliefs about ourselves or the world, about the environment, and examine our assumptions. And if we do that work of examining our assumptions, then we might recognize and accept that we were wrong, that our story that we were telling ourselves was maybe wrong or ineffective. And if we do that, then we can plan and prepare and try new ways of thinking, new roles, and then integrate that into a new perspective, a new way of seeing things, seeing ourselves or seeing the world or seeing our problem, whenever it maybe brought us to a psychotherapy or learning session. And so we kind of see these things overlapping, where we have this experience with the horse, and during that experience, we can have a disorienting dilemma or kind of be surprised and then reflect on it and examine our beliefs and so on and so forth.
Right.
And so here, oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
so here is just kind of saying where do equine assisted sessions fit in, and that top right corner there would be experiencing, and you could experience a disorienting dilemma or be surprised, and then after the session, reflection. And different models emphasize reflection to a greater or lesser degree. That could be a common factor. It certainly could be a good question for us to ask about what is the role of reflecting after a session. And then how does that lead again to change?
Every time I see Angela made this slide, so I didn't do all of them. Every time I see this, I get reminded of how when you start an equine session with somebody who hasn't been around horses, the first thing they say is, "Oh, my dog does that. That's just like my dog." And that would be an example of seeing something and staying with how we see and view the world. And then something happens that is totally different than what a dog does because they're horses. And that would be a disorienting dilemma because the person is like, wait, that's not how I understand the world. And they can either classify it as, oh, that was just an exception and not see the difference, or they can follow and look at their assumptions and change. That's like a little minor thing, minor example. And so East basically is about, we didn't really talk about the environment, but the environment and the context makes a difference. Is it sunny out? Is it raining? Is it cold? Is it windy? Are you doing indoors, outdoors? Who's the facilitator? What model are you using? What approach are you doing? All of those things are the context for East. And there are domains of experience. There are humans, there are horses, facilitator, and then the specific events that happen. And so I mentioned all the theories. We went through all the theories, and this is a picture that's in the book that's supposed to be scientific so that you get impressed that we thought about it and knew what we were doing. But then it was so overwhelming. I mean, we wrote the book, and sometimes it would be like, what order does that, where does that theory go? Or because it took so many months to do it that I had to make something simple. So I saw this thing about volvelles, and which is a kind of circle that turns. And I'll show you after because I don't, I have one here. But the idea was these are all dynamic different parts. This down here is what the humans experiences, polyvagal, their neuroception, which nervous system or physiological state is active, their past experience, what they're feeling in their body, what they're sensing with their senses, what is in the environment. Oh, the horses are eating grass, it's spring, and the horses are not picking their heads up to have anything to do with the people. Then what the horse's ventral vagal, the horse's polyvagal system is doing. So if the horse is in sympathetic and they're agitated, the experience of the person is going to be different than if the horse is in a ventral state. And then the horse has a behavior that they do. They might be intrusive, they might move away. The facilitator and what they do, how people are interpreting this in their thoughts and images, how they put it into language, and then those learning theories of what they do and how they process afterwards. So this is an example of a situation where both the client, the human being, I'm looking, oh, we're doing good on time. The client is in what we would call her neuroception, her out of awareness body is picking up and understanding that where she is a safe environment. Probably she has horse experience. That's my guess from looking at her picture. And she's in ventral vagal. And I hope you can't hear my dog squeaker in the background. Ventral vagal, which is this ability to be able to connect, open to connection because she's feeling safe. And maybe her body is calm inside, stomach isn't gurgling, and she sees the horse and makes eye contact with the horse and smells the horse, and all of that is influencing her experience, her past experience, maybe it's outdoors. And the horse, you can see that this horse is in ventral vagal as well. The horse has a vagal nerve and has the ability to connect or not. And in this situation, the horse is open to connection. And so they have what we call reciprocity. Two living beings who are having reciprocity and interacting in even nonverbal ways. And the person may only be gesturing in expressing what they're feeling because they don't have words. Eventually, maybe they come up with a story. And all of this is happening in Kolb's mode of experiencing. In this situation, this person came in and was in ventral vagal. Let me just ask you, are you seeing my arrow?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. This is in ventral vagal, and which is an open to connection, and not sure what's happening in their body. They don't have any ability to feel what's going on in their body. That's somebody who's just disconnected from their body, maybe. And they are seeing what's happening, and based on their past experiences, they're going to interpret what's happening. This is outdoors. The horse happens to be in sympathetic and has no interest in connecting and walks away. So we call that non-reciprocity. And the human being then has thoughts and interpretations of what that experience is, and maybe has a story and then a plot. And this kind of reflects what their core beliefs are and how they understand the world, because when this happens, the person will go back to being in sympathetic. They will not stay in ventral vagal. They will, when there's non-reciprocity, the person's anxiety goes up, their sympathetic nervous system gets activated because they're no longer safe. So there's a lot of dynamic things that are happening, and the person may question what their assumptions are. In this situation, the person came in sympathetic. How am I doing? I have 3 minutes. Okay. The person came in sympathetic, and what they were perceiving through their senses and feeling in their body, and their past experience with horses was influencing them. So maybe upset about something that happened at work or school, and coming into this environment with their heart rate being up a little bit, but they encountered a horse that was in ventral, a horse that approached and was open to connecting. And in that situation, you get what we refer to as co-regulation. And the person's nervous system calmed down. And so that what you hear over here, which I'm hoping it says because I can't see it, is that the person then shifts into ventral and they're able to connect. And so that is a description. It's a way of explaining what's happening. And so that's and I will show you this. This was like an example. I don't know if you can see, but I'll show it when
I have mine too.
Oh yeah, she's got her too. So these things all turn around. You know, if you're good and we somehow in a conference, we could have a thing where you can make these things, but they turn so that you can see how things can shift and other parts can shift. Basically, this thing about East is really, again, an umbrella idea, because no matter what models you're familiar with, even in hippotherapy, there are components of this that I'm guessing make sense to you. And so it's not that this is the only way to look at it. It is just a framework that allows us to be able to consider the different things, that all the variables that happen in equine-assisted interventions. And Angela and I have this dream that HHRF will say, okay, we want all research proposals to somehow look at this, what's happening in the mind and what's happening in the body of the human and the horse. And it doesn't have to be our theory, it could be anything, but just this idea that this is really a complicated issue. So 1 minute left before questions. And this is a picture of our book. that we're already trying to edit, to update and change. But
I'll
it
put a
goes,
link in the chat to the book.
oh, good. And this is, I paid $1.45 for this. Angela was trying to send me one of these things. I stuck it up there, so if you want to take a picture of it, then you could go to we have like a website or a network where if people are interested in having conversation about East and want to talk to other people who are interested in it, we created this site so that you could do that. You don't even have to talk to us, you could talk to each other. But the idea that this is a dynamic thing and that we tried to create a community. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and we're on time.
That was very good. I just want to add too that we're so excited for this opportunity because, like Noreen said, this isn't a fact or the truth. It's a theory. It's evolving, and so to get to share it with folks and then have people give us feedback, talk about it, try see if it helps explain, or not explain, but describe what's happening in sessions for you. That's what we're really kind of looking for. So it's wonderful to be able to share it with the group.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate you doing that. And there was a lot of questions in the chat, but you kind of answered them as we were going along. So I didn't know if anybody else had any other questions at this time. Everybody loves the wheel, by the way. So you could just patent the wheel.
Oh, well, can I say something about this? So we were trying to figure out, it moves around. We were trying to figure out if we could get a company to make these, like these little plastic wheels that people have for, besides the fact that it was extremely expensive to do. What was interesting was that after all of the time that we spent explaining how the horse and the human interact, trying to explain to the manufacturers, they came back with a wheel that they designed, which had a person riding the horse with a crop, which was actually not really what we were doing, but they put the horse on the back. They didn't think the horse was important. They thought that the human and the human experience was important and the facilitator was important, but they put the horse on the back, which I think says a lot for how people, particularly people who don't do this work, think about the horse as something not as central as what we know it to be. That's my last little, okay, I'll be quiet.
Yeah, that was great. Anything else? Any other questions? Oh, Nancy has a question.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, Noreen, you were so worried at the HHRF conference about your wheel. And I had to go present downstairs and I looked at that. I cannot tell you how much the way you laid your wheel out was really helpful to me because it's so aligned with my way of thinking, I guess, but I hadn't conceptualized it quite that way. So please give yourself a pat on the back because it is really extraordinary the way you put all this together. And you both have done such a lovely job of representing the complexity of what's going on within an individual and also a horse, and that it is not a simple 1 + 1.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to say thank you very much for an outstanding presentation and for taking a lot of complex things and presenting them translating them, right? Translating the science into a very digestible format. So well done to both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Nancy.
you very much.
Actually, yes, Nancy gave me the enthusiasm and confidence when I was about to present that maybe this was an okay thing.
I just dropped a link to Noreen's website and my website in the chat if you want to contact us or find out more.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate and thank you for developing a theory, because, how do we know what we know? And theory starts to explain it. And then the theory evolves over time when people research it and test it. And, when we're writing grants to get funding to do the research, we need the theory kind of there to explain, give it the background that, here's how it works, here's why it works, versus, you can't just say it's magic and poof, I get the $50,000 funding from HRF, we have to have the meat, to back it up. So I really appreciated that. I had after I moved down here, my husband died and we were starting the nonprofit. And so I interviewed this year for a couple of other academic positions because I used to teach, and I took that book everywhere with me, because part of what I was doing with these public health programs, or wanted to do, was to incorporate the equine-assisted learning with some of the, building peer training programs to, because we use ropes courses for team building and organizational team building to kind of develop that rapport between the students so they bond with each other, and just experiential work. And that's one of the things I just love about EAL. So kudos, give yourself lots of pats on the back. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, I'm going to stop recording, then you don't have to talk on the recording. Right. Well, thank you again. And we're going to wrap it up. Thank for this webinar Wednesday, and appreciate Noreen and Angela talking with us, and stay tuned.